Hey y'all. Thanks for tuning in to Mysteries of the Unexplained. Today, we're doing monsters and more. If you like this series and you've been watching these episodes, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I really dig unexplained things, mysterious things, monsters, UFOs, anything weird like that. And I appreciate everybody else out there that thinks that this stuff is cool. And again, thank you for your support for this series. Smoking a Missouri Meerschaum. This is called the Diplomat Bent Apple corncob pipe. Inside, Hearth Home Magnum Opus, blended by Russ Roulette and part of their Marquee series. It's pretty good. This is I think my second bowl, so I'm kind of getting to know it. It's an Oriental blend, or a Balkan blend, I guess you'd say, possibly. It's got Orientals in it, and I think I got where I like Orientals. I'm enjoying them. Smoking different ones. So we're going to start with a few water monsters, and then we'll go on to land monsters. So this is from, let's see, 1900 to 1970. Surveying the Amazon basin for the Royal Geographical Society of London in 1907, Major Percy Fawcett could not at first credit local tales of outsized snakes inhabiting the swamps and rivers. But as he was to write in his memoirs, personal experience convinced him they were true. Fawcett and his Indian crew were slowly drifting down the sluggish Rio Abuna when, almost under the bow of their flimsy boat, there appeared a triangular head and several feet of undulating body. This is from his book. It was a giant anaconda. I sprang for my rifle as the creature began to make its way up the bank, and hardly waiting to aim, smashed a .44 soft-nosed bullet into its spine, 10 feet below the wicked head. At once there was a flurry of foam and several heavy thumps against the boat's keel, shaking us as though we had run on a snag. We stepped ashore and approached the reptile with caution. It was out of action, but shivers ran up and down the body like puffs of wind on a mountain tarn. As far as it was possible to measure, a length of 45 feet lay out of the water and 70 feet in it, making a total length of 17 feet in the water, making a total length of 62 feet. On a return trip to London, Fawcett was branded a liar for his claim that he had bagged a 62-foot anaconda. That animal, scientists declared, could not possibly measure more than about 45 feet. Therefore, the observer's story was fantastic. That's from On the Track of Unknown Animals by Bernard Hovelmans, pages 284 to 86. Giant anaconda. Father Victor Hines, while going about the Lord's work in South America, saw what he thought was a water snake very much larger than Fawcett's anaconda. The priest, who happened to be a close friend of Lorenz Hagenbeck, a famous German animal dealer and zoo director, reported, during the great floods of 1922, on May 22nd at about 3 o'clock, I was being taken home by canoe on the Amazon from Óbidos, Brazil. Suddenly, I noticed something surprising in midstream. I distinctly recognized a giant water snake at a distance of some 30 yards. Coiled up in 2 rings, the monster drifted quietly and gently downstream. My quaking crew had stopped paddling. Thunderstruck, we all stared at the frightful beast. I reckoned that its body was as thick as an oil drum and that its visible length was some 80 feet. When we were far enough away and my boatmen dared to speak again, they said that the monster would have crushed us like a box of matches if it had not previously consumed several large capybaras, which are giant rodents. And that's from On the Track of the Unknown Animals by Bernard Hovelmans, pages 292 to 94. So that sounds like another giant snake. Both of those were on the Amazon. Two paratroopers on leave from the British Army, Captain John Ridgway and Sergeant Che Blythe, spent 92 days rowing across the Atlantic in 1966 on a self-imposed survival test that, as it turned out, included a strange encounter. In the pre-dawn of July 25th, the sergeant was sound asleep, and Ridgway, drowsy himself, was mechanically pulling at the oars of their 20-foot open boat when something disturbed the still darkness. As Ridgway wrote afterward, "I was shocked to full wakefulness by a swishing noise to starboard. I looked out into the water and suddenly saw the writhing, twisting shape of a great creature. It was outlined by the phosphorescence in the sea as if a string of neon lights were hanging from it. It was an enormous size, some 35 feet or more, and it came towards me quite fast. I must have watched it for some 10 seconds. It headed straight at me and disappeared right beneath me. Almost paralyzed by this apparition, Ridgway stopped rowing. After a moment, he forced himself to turn and look for it. He saw nothing, but a few seconds later, he heard a most tremendous splash, as if the monster had surfaced and then crashed back into the sea. Ridgway was shaken. His account continues, "I am not an imaginative man, and I searched for a rational explanation. Che and I had seen whales and sharks, dolphins and porpoises, flying fish, all sorts of sea creatures, but this monster in the night was none of these. I reluctantly had to believe that there was only one thing it could have been, a sea serpent." Rightly expecting incredulity, Ridgway concluded, "I can only tell what I saw with my own eyes, and I am no longer a disbeliever." That's from A Fighting Chance by John Ridgway and Che Blythe, pages 12, 131, and 32. The White River at Newport, Arkansas was the scene of several sightings in the 1970s. On July 28, 1971, Cloyce Warren of the White River Lumber Company went fishing with two friends. Mooring their boat just south of the White River Ridge, they cast their lines. Suddenly, the three men were astounded to see a huge column of water belching skyward from a point about 200 feet away. "I didn't know what was happening," Warren told later reporters. This giant form rose to the surface and began moving in the middle of the river away from the boat. It was very long and gray-colored. We had taken a little Polaroid Swinger camera with us to take pictures of the fish we caught. I grabbed the camera and managed to get a picture right before it submerged. It appeared to have a spiny backbone that stretched for 30 or more feet. It was hard to make out exactly what the front portion looked like, but it was awful large. The Newport Daily Independent published the picture 2 days later. The White River monster, seen in the distance, was slightly blurred around the edges, but appeared to be a large creature as yet unidentified. That's from Newport Daily Independent, July 30th, 1971. All right, here we are on to land monsters, mainly two-legged. Give this a tamp and a puff here. The devil's hoof marks were so called by the astounded villagers who saw them appear overnight in rural England in 1855. So this is before 1900. On the morning of February 8th, countless numbers of unidentifiable prints were discovered in the snow around 18 communities in the county of Devon. They were shaped like small horseshoes and ran in absolutely straight lines, one directly behind another, as if whatever had made them had only one leg or a peculiarly mincing gait. In a single night, the unknown beast had traveled about 100 miles, crossing a wide river, and had skulked around houses. In some places, it had apparently walked right up walls and along rooftops, and here and there, the tracks gave the impression that the thing had actually passed through walls and roofs. For some time thereafter, people feared to go out after dark, and the superstitious believed that the tracks were made by Satan himself. That's from On the Track of Unknown Animals, Bernard Hovelmans, pages 324 and 325. Two eyewitnesses drew these sketches of the devil's hoof marks, strange tracks seen in Devon, England in 1855. Here's a picture of those strange tracks. So this is from 1900 to 1970. As Russian troops penetrated the soaring Vanch Mountains of the Pamirs in pursuit of White Army soldiers in 1925, they heard stories from the local people of beast men who lived in the higher reaches. The soldiers also found footprints and other evidence of some man-like beings. Then one day, they shot one. The Red soldiers had fired into a cave where they thought the Whites were hiding. To their surprise, a wild, hairy creature ran out, crying inarticulately, and was killed instantly by the blazing machine guns. Looking at the corpse, the leader, General Mikhail Stepanovich Topilsky, thought at first it was that of an ape. It was covered with fur, he said, but I knew there were no apes in the Pamirs, and moreover, the body looked far more human than ape-like, indeed fully human. On closer examination, however, their medical officer declared otherwise. The creature was not a man, but what was it? Could the wild thing they had shot have been the snowman? The corpse, that of a male, was about 5.5 feet long and covered with dense, grayish-brown hair except for the face. There were a few straggly hairs on the upper lip. There was no hair on the ears, palms, knees, feet, and buttocks. The skin on the hands, knees, and feet was coarse and thickly calloused. The face was dark, with dark eyes, a heavy, sloping brow, prominent cheekbones, a flattened nose, and a massive lower jaw. Although the teeth were quite large, they seemed to be those of a human. The creature had a broad, unusually muscular chest, but otherwise its torso was much like that of a man. Unable to carry the body with them down the steep slopes, the soldiers covered it with a pile of stones. That's from The Yeti by Odette Cherenin, pages 104 and 05. So that's Abominable Snowman. During the fall of 1958, the wire services in northwestern California hummed with the story of Jerry Crew and the enormous human tracks he and his buddies had been seeing around their bulldozers for several weeks. The stir of excitement followed an attempt by Crew of Humboldt County to prove the existence of authenticity of the outsized tracks. An Associated Press story dispatched from Eureka on October 6th read, Jerry Crew, a hard-eyed cat skinner who bulldozes logging roads for a living, came to town this weekend with a plaster cast of a footprint. The footprint looks human, but it is 16 inches long, 7 inches wide, and the great weight of the creature that made it sank the print 2 inches into the dirt. Crew says an ordinary foot will penetrate that dirt only half an inch. I've seen hundreds of these footprints in the past few weeks, said Crew. He added he made the cast of a print in the dirt he had bulldozed Friday in a logging operation in the forest above Waitpeg, 50 miles north and a bit east of here in the Klamath River country of northwestern California. Crew said he and his fellow workmen never have seen the creature, but often have had a sense of being watched as they worked in the tall timber. Crew said he and his fellow, every morning we find his footprints in the fresh earth we've moved the day before, Crew said. Crew said Robert Titmus, a taxidermist from Redding, studied the tracks and said they were not made by any known animals. That's from On the Track of the Sasquatch by John Green, page 24. On a dark night in May 1976, 6 Communist Party officials were being transported through southern Hubei province in central China when the driver of their Jeep suddenly saw a large, hairy animal on the road ahead. The driver blew the horn and the creature started to clamber up a steep slope but skidded back down to the road. It crouched there on all fours, staring into the headlights with the look of a wild man. The driver stopped but kept honking, and his passengers got out to surround the creature at a safe distance. One tossed a stone at it. The creature rose to its hind legs, lumbered off into a gully, and then scrambled up a slope into the woods. The men agreed afterward that the creature had fine, soft hair like a camel's, with a dark red streak down its back and a face the color of flax. The legs were long and thick, the thighs heavy, and the soles of the feet were so soft that the animal made no sound while walking. The face was long, broad across the brow, and narrow at the chin, and had a wide mouth. Although the creature had vanished long before the investigators arrived to study it, an anthropologist with the Peking Museum of Natural History, a Mr. Zhu Gosing, suggested that it might well have been a distant relative of the abominable snowman or Bigfoot. That's from International Wildlife. Looks like issue 11, 18, pages 18 and 19. January, February 1981. And the New York Times, January 5th, 1980. An unusual Bigfoot episode occurred near Wantage in rural New Jersey in 1977. On May 12th, the Seitz family discovered that several of their pet rabbits had been killed overnight, apparently squeezed to death by something that had clawed at boards and ripped away a wooden barn to get at them. The probable culprit showed up again that night and stood as if showing off in the brightly lit yard. It was big and hairy, Mrs. Seitz said later. It was brown. It looked like a human with a beard and mustache. It had no neck. It looked like its head was just sitting on its shoulders. It had big red glowing eyes. A snarling dog leaped at it. The creature swatted the dog aside with a careless gesture and sent it flying for 20 feet. On the following night, the creature reappeared under the yard lights. Mr. Seitz and 3 companions, waiting with loaded shotguns, fired several times directly at it. The creature growled and made off through an orchard. Seitz was sure he had hit it, but no trace of blood was found in the daylight. Members of the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained made a thorough search of the area, examining the rabbit corpses and the damaged barn. They also heard a scream coming from a nearby swamp, which they were told was made by the creature, but they did not see the thing itself. Nonetheless, they were convinced of the sincerity of the Seitz family. After the SITU team left, the creature was seen again several times, once by the Seitz children, who spotted it crawling in the grass with an arm outstretched as if it were hurt and appealing for help. That's from Alien Animals by Janet and Colin Board, pages 177 to 78. Let's see. One more. A Sasquatch encounter was reported. Let me get a swig here. A Sasquatch encounter was reported by a hunter in October 1955 near the little town of Taitwan-Cachet in British Columbia, Canada. William Rowe, armed with his rifle, was climbing Mica Mountain one afternoon just for something to do, that's in quotations, when he saw what he took to be a grizzly bear on the far side of a small clearing. Moments later, as he watched, the animal stepped out into the open, and Rowe realized it was not a bear. In a sworn affidavit, he later declared, This, to the best of my recollection, is what the creature looked like and how it acted as it came across the clearing directly towards me. My first impression was of a huge man, about 6 feet tall, almost 3 feet wide, and probably weighing somewhere near 300 pounds. It was covered from head to foot with dark brown silver-tipped hair, but as it came closer, I saw by its breast that it was female, and yet its torso was not curved like a female's. Its broad frame was straight from shoulder to hip. Its arms were much thicker than a man's arms and longer, reaching almost to its knees. Its feet were broader proportionally than a man's, about 5 inches wide at the front and tapering to much thinner heels. The creature came within 20 feet of Roe, who was crouched behind a bush and squatted on its haunches. As it stripped and munched leaves from some bushes, Roe noted the way its head peaked at the back, the flat nose, protruding chin, and beady eyes, and he was struck by the short, thick, unhuman neck. All at once the wild thing caught Roe's scent and looked directly at him through an opening in the brush. A look of comical amazement crossed its face as it rose to its full height and started to walk away. The thought came to me that if I shot it, I would possibly have a specimen of great interest to scientists the world over. I had heard stories about the Sasquatch. Maybe this was a Sasquatch. I leveled my rifle. The creature was still walking rapidly away, again turning its head to look in my direction. I lowered the rifle. Although I have called the creature it, I felt now that it was a human being, and I knew I would never forgive myself if I killed it. As it crossed into the brush at the far side of the clearing, it made a whinnying sound, half laugh and half language. Beyond a stand of lodgepole pines, it tipped its head back briefly and uttered the same cry. Then it disappeared into the woods. That's from On the Track of the Sasquatch by John Green, pages 10 through 12. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Mysteries Unexplained. I sure appreciate y'all tuning in. This Magnum Opus is it's pretty good. It tastes like it's got a real incensey taste to it. Incense, kind of spice, incensey spice. I feel like I get a little sweetness out of it, a little bit. Well, next episode, spectral incursions. That's what we want to go over next time on Mysteries Unexplained. Thank y'all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Feel free to drop a comment and give me your thoughts on what you think about monsters, land monsters, water monsters, just monsters in general. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Like this content if you dig it. See y'all next time.